The ballroom glittered with gold chandeliers, diamonds flashing from every corner, and guests whispering about the most prestigious wedding of the year. At the center stood Adrian Cole, young billionaire, heir to a family empire, and now the groom everyone envied. His mother, Eleanor Cole, carried herself with the icy grace of a queen, her sharp eyes scanning every detail to ensure perfection. Nothing was supposed to go wrong today. But then, the whispers began. At the far end of the hall, a woman stepped inside. She wasn't wearing designer gowns or jewels. Instead, her beauty was simple, her elegance effortless, her dark skin glowing against the ivory lights. Heads turned, fans fluttered, and a murmur spread. Who is she? Eleanor noticed instantly. Her smile faltered. The woman, Naomi, stood still, clutching a small gift in her trembling hands. She wasn't here to cause trouble. She had been invited, though no one dared to believe it. Adrian, the billionaire groom himself, had sent the invitation quietly, against his mother's wishes. And Eleanor knew it. With the sharpness of a blade, she strode across the floor, her voice cutting through the music. "You do not belong here," Eleanor hissed, her words dripping with disdain. "This wedding is for our kind. Leave. Now." The music stopped. The guests gasped. Naomi froze, her throat tight, the sting of humiliation washing over her. Her heart screamed to run, but her pride, her dignity, refused to let her move. She looked at Adrian, her childhood friend, her secret hope, the man who once promised her the world. And then, the doors behind her opened again. Outside, engines purred. Lights flashed across the windows. One by one, sleek black cars rolled up the driveway, each more luxurious than the last. The sound was powerful, commanding. Guests rushed to the glass doors to see, gasping as the fleet of cars came to a halt, stretching like an army ready for battle. Naomi turned slowly, her eyes filling with both strength and sorrow. She had come here alone, but she was not powerless. Something was about to shift. And in that frozen moment, as Eleanor Cole glared and Naomi stood tall, the entire wedding held its breath. "Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click the subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now back to the story. Long before the glittering chandeliers and grand piano melodies of Adrian's billion-dollar wedding, there was a quieter world, a dusty street on the south side of the city. That was where Naomi grew up. Her childhood was shaped by resilience. Her father, a mechanic with oil-stained hands, had died when she was only 10. Her mother, a nurse, worked double shifts to keep Naomi in school. There were nights when Naomi did her homework by candlelight, refusing to let poverty define her dreams. And then there was Adrian. He wasn't the billionaire back then. He was just the boy who lived 3 blocks away, chauffeured to school in shiny cars while Naomi walked with worn-out shoes. To the world, they were different. But to each other, they were inseparable. Adrian admired her strength, the way she never complained even when life was unfair. Naomi admired his kindness, the way he'd sneak out of his mansion just to eat her mom's homemade food, laughing like any other boy. By the time they were teenagers, they shared secrets under streetlights. When Naomi's mother got sick, Adrian was there, helping with bills behind his parents' back. And when Adrian felt suffocated by his wealthy family's expectations, Naomi was the one who reminded him he wasn't just money, he was human. But Eleanor Cole, Adrian's mother, saw everything. She had always feared Naomi's presence. To Eleanor, Naomi was a threat, a stain on the perfect image she wanted for her son. She wanted Adrian's world spotless, filled with elite business connections, not the daughter of a mechanic. So when Naomi left for college on a partial scholarship, Eleanor ensured distance grew. She cut off Adrian's financial support when she noticed his money helping Naomi's family. She pushed him into high society gatherings, promising him empire-sized opportunities if he stayed away from distractions. And Naomi? She understood. Or at least, she tried to. She threw herself into her studies, working part-time jobs, building herself into a woman who needed no saving. But somewhere deep inside, she carried the ache of a promise Adrian had once made on a rainy night. No matter where life takes us, Naomi, I'll always choose you. Years passed. Adrian became the billionaire heir, running global companies. Naomi built her own quiet success, starting a non-profit to provide scholarships for underprivileged kids like her once was. She wasn't rich in money, but she was rich in respect, admired for her compassion and leadership. Still, she never expected an invitation to Adrian's wedding. When she saw his handwriting on that envelope, her hands trembled. Part of her told her not to go, that she'd only be walking into pain. But another part whispered, what if he still remembers? What if this is more than just a wedding invitation? And so she came. Now, standing humiliated before hundreds of guests, Naomi realized Eleanor hadn't changed. Adrian's mother still wanted her erased, unseen, forgotten. But Eleanor had made a grave mistake. Because Naomi wasn't the same young girl anymore. She wasn't powerless. And as those cars rolled up outside, the balance of power was about to change. If you were Naomi, would you have shown up at the wedding, or stayed away to protect your heart? Tell me in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. The ballroom was frozen. Eleanor Cole's command still hung in the air like poison. Leave. Now. Naomi's fingers tightened around the small gift box she had carried with such care. Her pulse hammered in her ears, shame threatening to drown her. Dozens of eyes burned into her, some pitying, some judgmental, others delighted at the drama unfolding. But before she could decide whether to walk away, the sound outside grew louder. Engines cut off. Doors opened. One by one, figures stepped out of the sleek fleet of cars. They weren't paparazzi, nor were they Eleanor's high society friends. They were powerful people in their own right, men and women Naomi had worked with through her nonprofit. Business leaders. Philanthropists. Even a senator. They had come, uninvited by Eleanor, but drawn by Naomi's impact in the world. People she had once helped now stood in tailored suits and evening gowns, entering the ballroom with authority. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Isn't that Senator Hayes? Wait, isn't she the CEO of Brookline Tech? Why are they here for her? Eleanor's smile cracked. For the first time, control slipped through her fingers. Naomi lifted her chin, swallowing the hurt in her throat. She hadn't called these people here, but somehow they had arrived, standing behind her when she needed it most. Adrian's heart pounded. He had watched the entire confrontation in silence, torn between loyalty to his mother and the promise of his own heart. Now, as Naomi stood tall with unexpected allies surrounding her, he realized something. Naomi wasn't the girl from the South Side anymore. She had become a woman the world respected, someone who could no longer be dismissed. And then the final blow came. One of the newcomers, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, walked forward and handed Eleanor a card. His voice was calm but firm. "Mrs. Cole," he said, "I believe you owe this young woman respect. Without her foundation, half the children in my district would have never seen the inside of a classroom. If Naomi leaves, I leave, and so do the rest of us." Gasps rippled through the hall. For once, Eleanor was speechless. Naomi's heart trembled, but she stood steady. This was no longer about humiliation. This was about truth. And in that moment, the wedding, supposed to be Eleanor's perfect showcase, had shifted into something else entirely. The question wasn't whether Naomi would leave. The question was, what secret bond still tied Adrian and Naomi together, and how much longer could it remain hidden? Do you think Adrian should step up and defend Naomi right here in front of everyone, or stay silent to protect the peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious what you'd do if you were in his shoes. The ballroom's energy had shifted. What was supposed to be a flawless society wedding was now buzzing with tension. Guests whispered behind manicured hands, watching Naomi stand tall while Eleanor Cole's jaw tightened with fury. Adrian's bride, Isabella, an elegant woman from one of Europe's wealthiest families, looked around with confusion and a flicker of unease. She hadn't expected this. Few people in the room even knew Naomi, yet somehow, her presence alone commanded attention. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. You think a few acquaintances in expensive cars will change anything? This is my son's wedding. You don't belong here, Naomi. You never did. Naomi's chest rose and fell, but she met Eleanor's glare without blinking. I didn't come to fight, Mrs. Cole. I came because I was invited. That single sentence sent a ripple through the crowd. Invited? By whom? Eleanor froze, realizing too late that Naomi's words had shifted the spotlight. Dozens of eyes turned to Adrian, who sat at the head table, stiff and pale. His fiancée's hand gripped his arm, but his gaze was locked on Naomi. For the first time in years, Naomi saw the same boy she once knew, the boy who used to sneak out of the mansion just to share fried plantain with her family. But this boy was trapped now, caught in the golden cage his mother had built. Adrian. Isabella whispered, her voice tight. What is she talking about? Did you invite her? The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian swallowed hard, the weight of truth pressing against his chest. His heart screamed yes, but his mother's icy stare warned him of the storm that would follow. Naomi held her breath. This was the moment she both dreaded and hoped for. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice calm, but trembling at the edges. Yes. I invited her. Gasps echoed. Eleanor's face hardened like stone. Isabella's hand slipped from Adrian's arm. Whispers now turned into open speculation. Why would he invite her? Who is this woman to him? There must be history here. Naomi felt her throat tighten, her heart pounding louder than the murmurs around her. She wanted to run, but something deeper rooted her in place. Because beneath Eleanor's hostility and Isabella's confusion, Naomi could feel it, the unfinished story between her and Adrian. And Eleanor knew it too. That's why her eyes blazed not just with anger, but with fear. Fear that Naomi was the one part of Adrian's life she could never erase. Gasps still echoed in the grand ballroom after Adrian's admission. He had invited Naomi. He hadn't just allowed her to come, he wanted her here. Eleanor's grip on the edge of the table tightened so hard her knuckles turned white. She leaned forward, her voice low, venomous, but loud enough for the room to hear. Adrian, she hissed, do you have any idea what you've just done? Naomi's chest tightened. She wanted to look away, to disappear under the weight of hundreds of eyes, but she held her ground. She had survived worse than whispers. Isabella, the bride-to-be, finally stood, her face pale and shaken. Adrian, she whispered, her voice trembling, why? Why would you invite her? The room was silent, waiting for his answer. Adrian's jaw worked as he searched for words, his eyes locked on Naomi's. For a moment, everything else faded, the chandeliers, the tuxedos, even the bride standing inches from him. All he saw was the girl who once made him believe he could be free. And then, in a voice that shook the walls of the ballroom, Adrian said, because she's the woman I should have married. The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, broken laughter. Isabella staggered back as if struck. Eleanor's hand flew to her chest. Naomi felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The gift box slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering against the marble floor. She hadn't expected this. Not here. Not like this. Eleanor recovered quickly, her voice like thunder. Have you lost your mind? Do you know what you're saying? This family's legacy, our reputation, our empire, you would throw it all away for her. Adrian stood, his voice firmer now. This empire means nothing if I can't live with the truth. I invited Naomi because she's not just someone from my past, she's the reason I am who I am today. And I won't stand here and pretend she doesn't matter. Every eye shifted to Naomi, whose breath came shallow and fast. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't come to ruin anyone's life. She had come because a piece of her still longed to know if the boy she once loved remembered. And now she had her answer. But at what cost? Isabella's tears streaked her flawless makeup as she whispered, "So all this time, you never loved me?" The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Adrian opened his mouth, but before he could answer, Eleanor stepped in front of him, shielding Isabella like a wounded child, her fury blazing. "No more. This wedding will go on as planned. You will marry Isabella tonight, Adrian, or you will lose everything. I'll see to it personally." Her threat was clear. If Adrian chose Naomi, he would be cut off from the empire, the fortune, the Cole legacy itself. The choice was laid bare. And Naomi, standing at the center of it all, realized with a shiver, this wasn't just about love anymore. This was about power, family, and the chains that still bound Adrian's life. If you were Adrian, would you risk losing your entire family empire for the chance to be with Naomi, or would you sacrifice love to keep your legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to see how many of you would choose heart over power. The ballroom had dissolved into chaos. Guests whispered like vultures circling a wounded animal, their gazes darting between Naomi, Adrian, and Eleanor. Isabella sat trembling in her chair, her wedding veil slightly askew, while Eleanor stood like a general on a battlefield, commanding the narrative with sheer force of will. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest. Every second in that room felt like an eternity. She could feel the judgment in the eyes of the wealthy crowd, eyes that had never known her story, only her skin, her class, her difference. She wanted to scream that she hadn't come to ruin anyone's life. She wanted to shout that she had a right to exist without being humiliated. But the words caught in her throat. Eleanor's voice rang out again, this time cold and calculated. "Naomi, you've made your point. You came, you were seen, and now you can leave with whatever shred of dignity you have left. But understand this, Adrian is not yours. He never was. He belongs to this family, this legacy, and nothing you do will ever change that." The sting of those words nearly broke Naomi. She had always known Eleanor's disdain, but to hear it so publicly, so cruelly, it felt like a knife carving into her soul. Her eyes flicked to Adrian. He looked torn apart, his fists clenched at his sides, his lips pressed tight as though words were fighting to break free. But he said nothing. Not yet. That silence was the final blow. Naomi felt the world collapsing around her. The strength she had carried into the room seemed to wither, replaced with the crushing weight of shame. She had built her life on resilience, on proving she was more than the world expected. But here, in this glittering palace, Eleanor had reduced her to nothing with a single command. The allies who had arrived in their fleet of cars shifted uncomfortably. Some looked ready to defend her, but others lowered their heads. This wasn't their war, it was hers. Naomi finally turned, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. She whispered, more to herself than anyone, "I should never have come." Her steps echoed against the marble floor as she walked toward the doors. The crowd parted like waves, their stares sharp enough to cut. Each step felt heavier than the last, dragging her deeper into despair. Adrian's voice almost broke the silence, almost. But Eleanor's glare held him still. Naomi reached the grand doors, her hand trembling as she pushed them open. The cool night air rushed in, wrapping her in its lonely embrace. For the first time in years, she felt small again, like the girl who never belonged, no matter how hard she tried. And as the doors shut behind her, the sound echoed like the end of a dream. Naomi stood alone in the driveway, the fleet of cars gleaming under the moonlight, but inside, she felt empty. Lost. Forgotten. Maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe she had never truly belonged in Adrian's world. The fleet of cars didn't stop at the entrance. They rolled right into the grand estate's courtyard like they owned the place. Engines hummed, doors opened in perfect sync, and out stepped men and women in immaculate uniforms, moving with a kind of precision that screamed power and discipline. At the center of it all, the main door of the leading Rolls-Royce opened, and the entire atmosphere shifted. A woman stepped out. Tall, elegant, dressed in a gown of deep royal blue that shimmered under the evening lights, her aura commanded attention without her saying a word. She wasn't just beautiful, she radiated authority. With every step, the crowd instinctively parted, whispers racing like wildfire. Who is she?" gasped one of the guests. "Wait, that's her. That's the woman the groom defended," another said in disbelief. Yes. It was Amara, the black woman who had been told to leave the wedding. Only now, she wasn't standing timidly by the side. She was walking like a queen, backed by a convoy that rivaled the billionaire family's own power. The billionaire's mother's smug smile faltered. She hadn't expected this. She thought she was humiliating someone powerless. But what stood before her now was proof that she had miscalculated. Amara paused in front of her, her voice calm but firm. "You told me to leave because you thought I wasn't good enough to stand here. But you forgot one thing. Respect is not given by wealth or bloodline. It's earned by character. And tonight, it's clear who truly lacks it." Gasps filled the air. The billionaire's mother's face turned pale. And then, one by one, people from the convoy began to emerge. Business executives, charity founders, even influential leaders Amara had quietly supported in the past. They weren't there for show, they were there for her. To stand with her. To prove she wasn't just a guest. She was a force of her own. The billionaire, standing proudly beside Amara, took her hand and declared, "This woman is not only my love, she is my equal. And anyone who cannot accept that has no place in my life, or my family." The wedding guests erupted in applause. The billionaire's mother, overwhelmed by the undeniable truth, struggled to hold her composure. But the tables had turned. Completely. Just as the applause reached its peak, someone else unexpected stepped out of the last car, someone whose presence would shake the family to its core. The applause thundered across the courtyard, echoing through the grand estate like a declaration of victory. But then, the final car door opened. The murmurs hushed instantly, and every pair of eyes turned to see who else had arrived. Out stepped an elderly man. His posture was steady, his eyes sharp, and though age had softened his features, his presence radiated the kind of authority that made even the most powerful guests straighten their backs. The billionaire's mother gasped, clutching her chest. "Father." Yes. It was her father, the billionaire's grandfather, who many thought was too ill to even attend. Yet here he was, walking slowly but firmly toward the center, supported only by a cane that tapped against the marble floor. He paused, surveying the scene. His gaze lingered on Amara, then on his grandson, then finally on his daughter, the very woman who had caused the humiliation. In a voice that carried both wisdom and weight, he said, "I've lived long enough to know that wealth without respect is nothing but a curse. My daughter, you brought shame upon this family tonight. Not because of the woman you rejected, but because of the arrogance you displayed." Gasps rippled again through the crowd. The mother trembled, her lips quivering as tears threatened to fall. Then, the old man turned to Amara. "My child," he said gently, "forgive the foolishness you endured tonight. You remind me of your late father, a man of honor, who once saved my business when I was on the brink of losing everything. You belong here, not because of the cars, or the titles, or the money. You belong here because of your heart." Amara's eyes welled with tears. She bowed her head, overwhelmed by the blessing of the one man whose approval mattered more than anyone's. The billionaire squeezed her hand tighter, his voice thick with emotion. This is the woman I choose. Not because she completes me, but because she makes me better. Tonight isn't about wealth or status. It's about love. And that is priceless. The crowd erupted once more, not with murmurs this time, but with cheers. The wedding that had once teetered on the edge of scandal now transformed into a celebration of unity, resilience, and true love. Just as the ceremony was about to continue, the billionaire's mother made a surprising move, one that no one expected. The courtyard brimmed with cheers, but amidst the celebration, the billionaire's mother stood frozen. Her face was pale, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one in control. The words of her father still rang in her ears, cutting deeper than any blade. "You brought shame upon this family tonight." Everyone watched, expecting her to storm out in anger. But instead, she took a shaky step forward. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I was wrong." The crowd gasped. Even her son stared in disbelief. Never in his life had he heard his mother admit defeat. She turned to Amara, her expression a mix of shame and humility. "You walked into this wedding with nothing but dignity, and I tried to strip it from you. But instead, you showed me what true strength looks like. Tonight, I saw more honor in you than I've ever shown myself. Forgive me." Tears glistened in Amara's eyes. For a moment, silence hung heavy. And then, she nodded. "Forgiveness is the only way forward. Yes, I forgive you." The billionaire's mother broke down, sobbing as she embraced Amara in front of everyone. The audience erupted into applause, not just for the love story unfolding, but for the healing of a family that had been broken by pride. The grandfather smiled warmly, his voice steady as he lifted his cane. "Let this be the legacy of our family, that love conquers arrogance, and unity conquers division. Tonight, we do not just witness a wedding, we witness a new beginning." The ceremony resumed, but this time, it felt different. Every vow carried more weight. Every cheer carried more love. And when the billionaire and Amara exchanged rings, it wasn't just the union of two souls, it was the joining of two worlds that had once seemed too far apart. As the sun dipped below the horizon and fireworks lit up the night sky, the billionaire whispered to his bride, "You walked in as the woman everyone doubted. Now, you stand as the woman everyone admires. But to me, you'll always be the woman who saved my heart." Amara smiled, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "And you'll always be the man who fought for me when it mattered most." They kissed under the shower of lights, sealing their love story forever. The guests rose to their feet in thunderous applause, celebrating not just a marriage, but a triumph of love, forgiveness, and the courage to stand against pride. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.